Well, I really thought that the future, and I still believe this, that the future will be all of us having a digital identity. We've kind of done it already with the .coms for corporate, right? If you think about IBM.com or Amazon.com, that's really the identity of that company or that brand, right? But what about all of us? Like, how do we identify online with everything moving online? And now with AI even pushing that faster and faster and faster, how do we do it? And there really wasn't a good solution out there where we owned our identity.
Today's guest is Sandy Carter, the COO at Unstoppable Domains. Unstoppable Domains allows people to buy .x, .crypto, .eth, and other Web3 domains for blockchain-connected web addresses. Like a URL, but kind of different. I know a lot of people in crypto have crazy long, like a bunch of letters and numbers for every single wallet address, but this kind of allows you to remove that and just be like Jackie.eth, which I'm sure Jackie.eth is taken. I'm excited to have Sandy on the show today to talk about digital identities, creator economy, what she's been working on at Unstoppable Domains, and more. Sandy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to dig into this subject. It's a great one.
Yeah, for sure. I really do think Jackie.eth is taken, though. There's got to be another Jackie out there, right?
I'm sure. Yeah, but you could get maybe Jackie.
Maybe my full name. Yeah.
Or .x or something like that too.
What's your domain?
So I have it down here, at least on my screen. It says Sandy X. That's one of my favorites. I also have Sandy.crypto.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's great. You got the Sandy name.
Yeah.
There's no other Sandys allowed, at least for that. Right. Sandy, before we started recording, we actually talked about how you worked at IBM for a while. And then you also worked at AWS as an executive at both the companies. Why leave? Why come to crypto?
So it was really interesting. So I left IBM and I went to a startup, my own startup actually. And then I left my startup and I went to Amazon. So you can see I have this little pattern in my life of I did a startup, I went to IBM, I did a startup, I went to Amazon, and now I'm at a startup. I really love the diversity of having a startup where you're doing everything, you're getting your fingers in the whole pie. And then I love having a large enterprise where you've really got all this resource and you can make anything come true. And you've got the balance between the two. So I've actually hopped around to both. The way I came to Unstoppable, though, is I was at Amazon Web Services, and I was asked to look into some of the emerging tech. So I had been doing AI, but they wanted to explore spatial computing. They wanted just to explore blockchain. They wanted to explore, quantum, some of the new things that were coming out. So I actually went and did a deep dive on those areas. And as I was looking at blockchain, and things like universities and banks and how these companies were using it. And then I discovered all of the Web3 use cases. And I just thought that was very powerful. After about 9 months, the founder of Unstoppable read an article I had written about the future of digital identity.
There we go.
And he took me to dinner. He goes, I'm in Seattle. Let me take you to dinner, because I lived in Seattle at the time with Amazon. And he took me to dinner and he explained the kind of the vision. And then he offered me a job. And so that's when I decided to leave Amazon. That was one of the reasons. I also got a great board opportunity for an AI company and a couple other things too. I absolutely loved working at Amazon. I would never trade it for anything, for sure.
But great Unstoppable. Company. Yeah.
But Unstoppable. Yeah. But I would never trade that experience is what I mean.
Okay.
I learned so much there.
Yeah. What year was that when you were looking into things at Amazon, and then fast forward to when you had that dinner?
I've been with Unstoppable for almost 3 years. So this had to be like 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
Unstoppable was founded in 2018, but I wasn't here with the founding team. So I joined a little later.
And at that time, you were looking into blockchain technology, like use cases, integrations, and everything, maybe from more of a corporate standpoint, if that's fair to say, because you were at AWS. But then when you had conversation with the CEO at Unstoppable, what was it about the conversation that made you decide that this was something worth pursuing?
Well, I really thought that the future, and I still believe this, that the future will be all of us having a digital identity. We've kind of done it already with the .coms for corporate, right? If you think
Mm,
about IBM.com or Amazon.com, that's really the identity of that company or that brand, right? Marketeers. I know when I was there in marketing, I spent a lot of money making sure that my IBM.com or Amazon.com was perfect, right? And really represented my brand. But what about all of us? Like, how do we identify online with everything moving online? And now with AI even pushing that faster and faster and faster, how do we do it? And there
mhm.
really wasn't a good solution out there where we owned our identity. Some people would say, oh, my Facebook ID or my Meta ID is my identity, but you don't own that, right? Like Facebook can shut that out anytime. I just chatted last night to a gentleman who's got over 1 million followers on X or Twitter, and his account was shut down. So that can't be his identity either because he didn't
Yeah.
own it.
Hmm.
And so that idea of owning your own digital identity, really being able to control what was in that, how it was viewed, just like a corporate for .com, was very appealing to me.
Yeah.
Especially, I have two daughters, and they're coming up, and I think this is going to be really important, not just for us today, but in the future as well.
Yeah. I think about it a lot, especially with Twitter. Or X, that's where my main following is, right? And I always joke that if I lose that account, I'm not trying again. Like, I'm good, I'm done. So I can't even imagine with like 1 million plus followers what that feels like. And I often think about like my online identity as like my name, but also my username. And it's Jack Melanek. And I think a lot of people think I go by Jack, and I really don't. Like maybe occasionally if people want to call me it, sure, I'm not like picky, but I think of myself as like Jacquelyn online and Jack Melanek as my username. And so how does this type of digital identity kind of take it to the next level through something like Unstoppable Domains? Like what is it providing on top of like maybe the usernames I already have?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, you own this, so no one can take it away from you. It
Okay.
lives on top of the blockchain. And the blockchain is not owned by a single entity or country or company. And so you own it. You decide what you do with it. Inside of that digital identity, though, there are becoming more and more things that you can store in there that are of value. For example, I'll give you some of the fun ones first, like you can store a ticket in there, right? Like think about the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl gave out a digital ticket. So you've got a digital ticket, but where does it go? Like, how do you
Hmm.
show it off? You can post it on Twitter once or X once, but
Yeah.
then what do you do, right? So I can have that in my digital identity, which is represented by Sandy.x or Jackie.crypto. That can be stored in there.
Hmm.
The other things that I think are interesting is you can store discounted coupons. So if you're a retailer, inside of my identity, I can store my 10% off. Well, I don't know about you, but I use a lot of loyalty cards, and people
Hmm.
have a physical card and they like will use like a little punch thing to punch them out,
Yeah.
lose it half the time, right? Like I'm
Hmm.
getting ready for a reward and then I can't find the card. So here you can have that in your digital identity.
Hmm.
I can have education in there. So let's think about I'm right now in Scottsdale, Arizona. ASU is the largest school out here, Arizona State University. If I graduated from Arizona State, I could have that diploma sitting inside of my identity as what we call a soul bound token. So that means no one can take it away from me.
Hmm.
And that also means that I can't transfer it to you because you didn't graduate from
It's unique
Arizona
to
State
you. Yeah.
University.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so therefore, it's got a lot of power. Think about LinkedIn. I just read this factoid the other day. It's too funny to me. 30% of people who put a school on LinkedIn never graduated from the school.
And they just put it there.
Why? They just put it there. Why? Because there's
Yeah.
no one who's checking it. But
Wow.
if you have a soul-bound token that you can't, move anything away from, and it's with you, then you can trust that you
Hmm.
actually went to that school, which is very valuable to corporations, right? Knowing that I really went to that school.
Hmm.
That's really important. And then, and we're working with cities too. Like let's take Austin, Texas. You could put your electric bill in there. You could put your driver's license in there. You could put your car title in there or your lease for your apartment in downtown Austin. And then you have everything there digitally for you, protected. And to me, that's a lot of power, a lot of capability and value that you as a person now have in your own digital identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's super valuable. And even for like loyalty rewards or like proof that I went to a concert or the Super Bowl, which I didn't go to the Super Bowl, maybe one day, but that plus the work experience and where you graduated from college or high school or whatever it may be. How do you integrate that though? Is it on the colleges and the businesses to prove that you worked and graduated from there? Or is it on the person to upload the information to verify that?
So for the universities are presenting you with a physical diploma and a digital diploma. And that digital diploma, then you just specify where it goes. So you can specify it goes to your digital identity. And so that's how that's done. I don't know about New York. I think New Jersey's doing this. I know Arizona's doing this. I have a digital copy of my driver's license. Do you have that yet? I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't updated mine in a while. I know they're doing like the Real ID rollout and everything, but it would be valuable, yes, to be able to have that on my phone or something.
Yeah. So when I'm in Arizona, like I can have my passport or my driver's license digital inside of my identity, and I can use that to get through the airport. The reason I asked if you're doing it is because there are some airports that will not allow me to use the digital version. I can only have that paper version to use, but it has a lot of power. But think about this. So I was just in New York and I was presenting to a group of 100 healthcare startups. Now, I think this is very powerful. It's not today, but it's coming. They told me that the biggest reason that we are misdiagnosed today with, you don't have this, you have this, is that doctors don't have access to every piece of information about you, right? Yeah. They might not know that your allergy is causing something else, and so they don't have that link. But for my digital identity, imagine if I could store in there all of my medical records. It would be available to me. And then I could share that with a doctor instead of having to send notes and emails and try to get it there in time, et cetera. I will tell you, these 100 startups I met with in New York City, there's a powerful case for this. Like they believe this will be something that changes the game for healthcare moving forward, especially now as you apply AI to that. So now you have all your data, it's your data. Now AI can take a look at everything and help with the diagnosis. I mean, it's very powerful.
Yeah, that's extremely powerful. And that's actually something I've said in the past, like, because I live in New York. I went to school in North Carolina. I moved to Texas. I'm back in New York. So I've had different doctors, dentists, etc. for a while. And to your point, I had to kind of change the update or like the status of things. I had to tell people again, oh, this is what happened there. And like, I'm a relatively healthy person. So it wasn't the biggest strain in the world, but it was still a pain. And imagine if you are someone who actually has a lot of health problems. Having that all in one database, to your point, would be huge. But what would be like the timeline to roll this out? Like, are these people at this conference actually working on this right now? Or it's like, hey, I like that idea. Let's work with Sandy.
They are working on it right now. The only problem is in the US, we have a bunch of HIPAA regulations, right?
I've heard that too, yeah.
that is the biggest inhibitor right now. It's really interesting because in other countries, I think that this will actually go faster as we move along. And I think it will be probably more prevalent in other places because they have government-owned or government-run healthcare systems. So if the government says, hey, let's do this, they can do it here. There's a bunch of policies. So I would say everybody in the conference was like, we have to do this. There are companies working on it. They're just trying to work through the policy issues right now to see if they can make movement.
So annoying.
It is. Yeah. It is when you've got the tech ready and then so many things besides the tech that have to work, right?
Yeah. I mean, the crypto industry 100% knows that and all the blockchain technology. We talked about like Web 2 use cases. Are there other categories or types of sectors that really want to dive into honing in on digital identities? Like we've talked about healthcare. What are some other use cases that you're seeing like knocking on Unstoppable Domain's door, or that you would like to then go out and approach?
Yeah, so we talked about healthcare, we talked about education, we talked about retail with the discount and loyalty. I think one of the bigger ones is financial services, which is where, crypto or blockchain got its start with the biggest use case, which was Bitcoin. It's interesting. So what we do, Jackie, is every week we do between 10 million and 30 million transactions, taking your name like Sandy.x or Jackie.crypto and turning it into that long set of 21 characters and numbers that is your wallet address so that you can buy something with crypto. That is the biggest use case. And that's a big financial services use case. Now, it's pretty interesting to see how different cities are leveraging and using crypto today. So, for example, I was just in Austin. There was an ATM that enabled me to change money for Bitcoin. I thought that was interesting. I was in Vegas and I was able to buy a shirt with crypto in a store. Now, and I was talking to several stores and I was like, wow, I've never seen Bitcoin use this much or blockchain crypto use this much in retail, like in physical stores. And they said, well, we get so many visitors from Asia coming in and they're used to using crypto. So I thought that was interesting. And then, of course, I went to Singapore. I paid for my cab with my phone and crypto, paid for dinner with crypto. I was in Lisbon. I was able to pay for not only for dinner, but they presented me with this sheet of paper that had all the different types of cryptos that they accepted. It was so funny for a restaurant to hand me a sheet, not just a menu of my food, but a menu of crypto I could pay for. So I do see financial services, especially with all the new areas coming back as well, and how they're leveraging crypto and financial services. So I do think that that's a really interesting one. And then I also think real estate is another one that we're going to see this happen to. So I don't know if you've talked to Proppy Keys or Proppy, but they're using now a digital version of your title. So instead of having to sign a huge stack of papers, I think mine to buy my house was about this thick, actually. Now you can do that online, on chain, sign it, and it's yours, right? I think that's pretty interesting too.
Yeah, and that expedites a lot of things. While you were talking about all those different countries, it made me think about when I was in Argentina. It was very similar too, where they accept a lot of stable coins and crypto just because the local currency when I visited, and I still think now is not that great. And then in the US, on the other hand, I get excited every time I see a store that accepts it. Whether or not I pay with crypto, that's a different response, but it's less common in the States, right? So I think
that's right. I think that's been, based on the regulation that we've seen in the past. I think that will change as we see new laws passed and less SEC regulation coming in on some of these exchanges as well. I think that definitely will change as we go.
How are you looking at expansion in the US market now with that point in mind?
So we do business in all countries, everywhere. US is obviously one of our biggest, but, we're also seeing huge increases in the Middle East. They have a big focus there, as well as in Asia. There's huge opportunities there. So in the US, we're really helping taking industries through this like one step at a time. Like retailers, maybe using the lowest hanging fruit. I hate using that term, but it's the lowest hanging fruit that you can use and leverage for that digital identity.
What about retailers? Makes it kind of the easiest option. Is it the loyalty rewards and everything that you mentioned before or something else?
Yeah. We were making a lot of really good progress. And I don't know if you recently heard that Starbucks was like the big shining star. They weren't working with us, but they were working with Polygon, who is also one of our partners. But they just retracted their Web3 loyalty program. And my my assumption is that it didn't do well because it was actually two loyalty programs. They didn't combine it into their Web 2 loyalty program, and Web 2 had already caught on so great. So I do see other retailers looking at it. I've got several companies now, evaluating it. Everybody wants to make sure it's safe. So I think everybody's waiting for all the new rules, the new laws, the new regulations to come through. And then I think we're going to see this acceleration in the US.
When it comes to digital identities, we talked about it a little bit in the beginning, but I'd love to hear your thought on like how these on-chain domains can kind of help people form better digital identities in terms of content creators, people who either have a large following or want to create one. You talked about that person in the beginning who had the 1 million followers, lost them. How can you kind of retain your identity with these domains?
Yeah, today it's less about social following. So it's less about replacing an X or a Facebook, for example. It's more about making sure it's almost like a LinkedIn view of yourself, right? So the profile really represents who you are. And it has in it information about you. So for example, I'm a female patent holder. So I've got a little badge that shows I'm a female patent holder. And that enables me to chat based on that badge with other females in that group. And so there are, areas like that your digital identity can help you connect and network. But primarily today, it's used more transactionally, right? I'm going to buy crypto. I'm going to exchange crypto. I'm going to leverage it to showcase that I've earned a 10% discount, some of those type of things versus I've got a social following. That's today. I think that may change in the future, but that's today.
In terms of the types of groups that you're in, which ones do you find yourself like most active in or like bringing the most value to you? Remember trying to move your assets between chains, watching the minutes tick by, wondering if your transaction would make it? Yeah, we've all been there. But here's the thing. While other bridges feel like taking the scenic route, Across is your express lane. Base, Arbitrum, Optimism, boom, boom, boom. Your assets move between them faster than you could say cross-chain. Across isn't just another bridge. When Uniswap needed the fastest, most reliable way to move assets cross-chain, they chose Across. Now millions of Uniswap users are swapping between chains without even thinking about it, because that's how it should be. Whether you're moving assets yourself or building the next big thing in crypto, Across makes cross-chain feel like the same chain. No more scenic routes, no more complexity, just 2-second transfers between chains. Ready to join the express lane? Head to across.to and experience what bridging should have been all along.
Well, today I'm really fascinated with artificial intelligence and blockchain and the power that it can bring to the table. So for example, I don't know if you saw the Gillamy style pictures that everybody was posting.
The Gilby, Studio Gilby stuff. I'm probably saying it wrong, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. A Gilby. I don't. Anyway, ChatGPT opened up their new image creator and anybody could create that. And then all of a sudden there became this huge backlash because, they take, 20 years to create a picture with those images. And now you can do it in 7 seconds with AI. And there was no credit going back to the studio themselves. And so I actually did write a Forbes article about it and talk about how blockchain could have helped in that example, right? Had the studio and their images been protected or maybe invisibly watermarked with blockchain, showcasing the owner was the studio, and then they could have gotten a percentage of royalties or something based on a smart contract. I don't know how much your listeners know.
No. Yeah, they got this.
Okay, they got it. Okay, great. So a smart contract could be, fractionalized ownership. So that could have fixed the problem. Instead, OpenAI, I don't know if you saw yesterday, they backed away. You can no longer, if you haven't created your picture, you won't be able to create it right now. And not at least on OpenAI. I hear some other engines are allowing you to do it, but not OpenAI because of that that issue. So I do feel like this combo of blockchain and AI, especially with the deep fakes that are out there, the ownerships issues that are out there, are really a powerful combination. So I find myself really drawn to that particular area right now. How could we use a digital identity to claim ownership of a picture, a quote, a video, so that you would know that I could trust that that was real, or or there was a fair creator economy payment going to that creator.
Yeah, I think about that a lot too, in terms of like verification. There is definitely an element out there where you don't really know where the image originally came from, whether or not it's real or AI generated. That's a separate conversation. But then also to your point about IP and knowing whether or not you're actually taking something that is copyrighted or is it not? Like, that was kind of my first thought when all those things are coming out. I was like, I know there's an element in the US at the very least where you can do like parodies, and that's how you could get away with using other people's content. But these weren't parodies. They were just recreations of us in another form, in an image. And I think on the AI front, there is a lot to be done with blockchain integration. I know some people are like, oh, it doesn't need blockchain. And it's like, okay, AI probably doesn't need blockchain, but I think it makes it better, especially on the open source front. I don't know if you're thinking about it from that lens too.
I agree. I think it makes it more responsible AI, right? I mean, you can do anything, right? But is it legal, and is it ethical, and is it responsible? And I think blockchain makes AI more responsible. I was just looking at the Edelman Trust Barometer. If you looked at, I love Edelman because they always, they come out with, do you trust this or do you trust this? And they recently came out with one in 2025 that talked about, a whole set of things, but AI was one of them. And we're like on the cusp. It was like, 51% trust, 49% don't trust. The US was lowest in trust. India was highest in trust. And so we're at that cusp where if we really want this technology to be accepted, trust is the basis of any relationship that you have, even with technology. And so I think it's really important. I'll tell you a funny story. So I don't know if you remember the Pope. There was a picture going around of the Pope in his puffer jacket.
Yes. And I thought I genuinely thought that picture was real. Yeah. And it wasn't, right?
I did too. I thought it was real. It was a Ballman puffer too. So it's a branded Parisian puffer. So they
expensive,
were like, yeah, like, oh, the Pope's wearing our puffer. And so then, of course, the Pope came out and said, look, that's not a true picture of me. I never would spend $3,000 for a puffer, et cetera, et cetera. And so he kind of disproved that that was a true picture. But then what started happening is then people had non-trust for other pictures. So for example, I was in LA and I was on a red carpet event for Web3 Awards. And it was cold. It's not supposed to be cold in LA. It was cold. So the only jacket I had was my puffer that I had worn on the plane.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So I had the puffer with my beautiful, elegant evening dress. And somebody posted the picture. And immediately, what did they assume?
It was fake.
That's not a true picture. And so we actually played around with identities where I could actually use my domain, sandy.x, to provide a verification, just like a check mark that Twitter does, provide that verification that that picture was real, and then I approve that picture so that people would assume, and then again, gain trust, right? And so we've talked for a while about who has the responsibility. Again, I don't think this is a tech question. I think this is a policy or a business model question, right? So, people get misquoted all the time. But you can easily validate a quote. Like even this interview, we could validate that Sandy Carter was actually in the interview. This is not my avatar. And we could have a verification check. But who should pay for that? Should it be your podcast? Should it be me? Because remember, when you're doing something on blockchain, someone's got to pay for the minting and the gas fee.
Yep.
Who should it be? Me? Should it be you? Should it be my company? And so those were the type of questions we started getting into. It'd be great for a news agency to have it. Yes. But, news agencies don't have a lot of margin.
Mm-hmm.
Then does it fall to the company whose person's being quoted? Does it fall to the person? Anyway, that's really what has slowed down, I think, the adoption of AI with blockchain. In this particular case of validation, validating that something is true, is because who pays the cost for it? What's the business model? Just like in the healthcare example, it's how do we deal with policy around HIPAA? I think the interesting thing is that most of these questions for AI and blockchain aren't tech questions. We can do it. It's how is it feasible? Like, what's the right way to implement it? And I think a lot of people are forgetting about that change management piece of the equation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think also trust is like a conversation we have on this show a lot, and it comes in many different forms, but it's very hard to build and it's very easy to lose, both in personal relationships, but in professional settings and with technology, to your point. I think that stat you said about like the 51% versus 49% trust, not trust AI is super interesting. And also, I think it derives from maybe human behavior misusing it more than the AI itself. I think there are, nuances within that. But like, for example, with the Pope image, someone had to create that and put it out there as if it were real. And then when people feel foolish or like duped, they turn around and they're like, oh, I don't trust this anymore, because it made me look silly.
Right. And 3.6 million people had retweeted that. That was just on Twitter.
Yeah.
So 3.6 million people. I also find it very fascinating. If you look at the stats, that the US is one of the countries that has the lowest trust rating of AI right now.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, part of it is I think that we have been experimenting with it longer, maybe. So India, for example, according to Edelman, has a 77% trust of use of AI technology. The US has a 32%. I mean, that's huge. That's a huge difference. And so why is that? Well, I think part of it could be, Amazon started using it and then they started not interviewing women for engineering jobs because they trained the data wrong.
Oh,
did you know
I did
that?
not know that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Amazon was one of the first. They were like, oh, I'm going to make the recruiting process, because we used to get, tens of thousands of applicants. So let's have AI. So they trained AI on engineers, and AI determined, oh, well, most of engineers are men, so let's just hire men. And so
and that's why you kind of need human intervention,
That's right. You got it. I actually wrote a book called AI First, Human Always. And I talk about this intersection of AI and blockchain. And I talk about why we can't eliminate humans in the process just for things like that, right? Mm-hmm. It made an assumption, okay, 80% of your engineers are men. Let's just go after men. Mm-hmm. But you have to train it with the right bias. I think the other thing is, I don't know if you remember that big scam that ran around. I was so afraid for my parents. There was a deep fake voice.
Oh, and they'll call and pretend like they're family or someone and someone's in trouble.
Or the IRS, and you got to send money right now. Yeah, and we got scammed. So I don't know if it's because we get more scams in our country and that's why the trust is lower. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I would like to dig into that a little bit more, because I do find it curious that India's trust is so high and our trust is so low. There's only one country that trusts less than us, and that's Germany.
That's funny. I'm laughing because I have a family in Germany, and that checks out. That checks out.
And Germany, you could see, like, they're like, if they can't explain it to me, very process oriented.
Exactly.
Right? If you can't explain it to me, it didn't happen, right? Yeah. So that one you can understand a little bit, but it's really fascinating, and I'm seeing a lot of decentralized AI companies coming up. I don't know if you've seen the next round of funding, but a lot of decentralized AI just for this problem. How do you prove who owns data? Even someone has tokenized an LLM, placed on chain the ownership of the LLM. It's an open source model, but they wanted to know who was using it, who was deriving value from it. And so they tokenized it so they could track it. Mm-hmm. And so I do think that's another interesting one as well.
How do you see this playing into your role as COO? Like, are there certain AI tools or technologies that you're trying to implement to verify things, but also build trust, off that topic?
Yeah, I mean, so we're in a really interesting state because we can use our digital identities to verify if something's real. So we've talked about that. Mm-hmm. We're also using it inside of our company to level up. So Unstoppable is a startup. We did our unicorn raise at $1 billion something plus valuation. But, we're still small, right? We're not like the IBMs or the Amazons that I used to work at. And so we have to punch above our weight class. So we are leveraging AI. I'll give you one example. We get lots of questions from people about all the things, Jackie, that we've been talking about, right? And so what we've done is we've created an AI agent, and that AI agent answers some of the questions that we commonly get. It's answering right now about 30% of our questions, and our customer sat has gone up because the AI can answer it really fast. It's really clear because we've gone through the answers, and people are right now at least liking it. So our customer sat has gone up. Yeah. I think use cases like that can help you, as a company, get stronger and better in your core, so that you've got AI helping you out as well.
Mm-hmm. That's, I think, super interesting. And I think there's purpose with AI in many ways where it's like, it just expedites things, but you don't need like a person sitting there answering the same email over and over and over. That's a bad use of your time. And one of the questions I had written down for you was about business innovation and strategy. And I looked at your LinkedIn before we recorded, and I saw that you wrote, you helped Unstoppable Domains company growth increase by 2,300%, which is a lot. And I'm sure you remember probably writing that. But what was that like? And like, how did you do that? Especially for a startup where maybe you don't get the same resources that you would get at like a massive corporation.
So one of the things, that growth came through partners. It was partner growth for us. And for us, we're a B2B2C company. So we work with companies. We help their users get their digital identity. And so they're the ones typically with the relationship with the C or with the customer themselves. And so when I came into the organization, one of the things that one of the reasons they hired me was to focus on this area to grow it. And so we started partnering with great companies like blockchain.com, has tons of customers, Polygon, Pudgy Penguins, if you guys know.
Oh, yeah. We had Luca on the show. We had the CEO on. Yep.
So we partnered with Luca to do a .pudgy for a digital identity for his users. Yeah. Even for kids, right? Playing the game, his Pudgy World game, they can log in with Sandy.pudgy or Jackie.pudgy. And so that's really where that partner growth came from, was from doing these relationships and these partnerships as we've moved forward. And I think it's also, thinking about things in a little bit different way, like what can you tokenize and what would be valuable. So, right now, everybody's talking about, we're going to tokenize everything. I just went to a NASA, and they're tokenizing space debris. And then,
not the stars or planets. They just went to the debris.
Yeah. Because there's apparently, I didn't know this, but apparently there's a huge debate when we clean up space and we bring back down debris, it's very valuable.
I did not know that.
Who owns it? Like, how can you tell that is my debris? And I guess a lot of companies try to claim it because it's so valuable. And so if you tokenize it, you've got a way to identify ownership of whose debris is up there, and also charge them for bringing it down too, so that's another cool thing. But also thinking about, I was working with a couple of luxury clothing providers, and they're worried about verification that something is real. So for example, in Japan, the number one thing you can get a new mom is a Burberry onesie.
Oh,
but how?
That's really nice.
Yeah, it's like the greatest thing. But because your baby grows out of it like really fast, it's like they wear it for 2 days and then it's too small. Yeah, there's a huge secondary marketplace for Burberry onesies. Huh. So how do you know that Burberry onesies that you're buying is real? And so now what luxury providers are looking at, they've actually formed this large consortium to source the origin of the Burberry item, right? So they can source it back to the cotton that it came from, all the way to the manufacturer, all the way to who purchased it the last 3 times. Right. So would it be cool that you knew, oh, wow, Michael Jackson had this Burberry onesie and now my kid has this Burberry onesie, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But all of that, where do you store that? Your digital identity, right? So I could store the fact that I now have this Burberry onesie in my identity, in my digital identity, so that I can identify. So there's just so many use cases here. What we're trying to do is focus on the ones that are most interesting and the industry is most ready for it, right? Are they ready to go in the space? And fashion actually has been ahead of the game in NFTs and blockchain as well.
Yeah, I'm not in the market for a Burberry onesie. Don't have kids yet. Not yet. One day. But I do see the value in that. And I've been saying this for years. Like, I like vintage designer bags. And oftentimes the resale for those is either like a lot higher or it's like weirdly cheaper. And I'm like, is it cheaper because this is fake or because I just got a good deal? And like, unless you know your bags and all these different companies, you might not know. But if there was a way to verify that, to your point about these onesies, that would be extremely valuable across markets, not just my own personal interest. But
yeah, I think bags are a really big one because that's a big fraud area for luxury brands. Where would you store that, right? Let's say they gave you digital ownership. Let's say you bought let's say you bought a vintage Chanel bag and they gave you a digital, hey, this is a real bag. Where would you store that? And so these are the type of things we're starting to think through. I was working with a guy right now who is doing car titles. And he's gone across 7 or 8 states. And so he's got car titles now that are digitized, which makes it cheaper for the state because they don't have to produce all the paperwork and easier to do a transfer, right? So if I buy a car, I can now just digitally transfer something. You don't have to go down to a bank, sign it over, lose the title, et cetera. But he came to me and he was like, what I didn't think through was, where do I put these things? I've got an auto trader who has 100. They need to store them. And so anyway, so there's just so many different areas that you can look at for the future in this particular space.
Out of all the ones you've seen recently, which one is the most interesting to you? Or you're like, I love this idea?
Oh, well, I love vintage bags too. So,
so we got to get someone to do this. Yeah.
I got to get someone. Yeah. In fact, there is a consortium working on it right now. I've met with them 2 or 3 times. So there is someone working on it right now. I love the car title one because, states right now are under a lot of pressure. They're losing funding. And I was pretty surprised at how much money states spend with car titles, like the paper car titles. And so I thought this would be a good one, given their funding's getting cut. This would cut cost a lot. So I do like that just for, my civic duty or my, being a US citizen. I do like that one too. But the one I love the most is healthcare. So Jackie, I was in Brazil. I was on a platform and the platform collapsed. I fell 16 feet and I broke everything on my left side.
Oh my God.
Had to go to the hospital and this hospital said, we need to do emergency surgery, to make sure everything's fine. They said, we just need your medical records. Do you know it took me 48 hours to get my medical records to Brazil? And the hospital in Brazil was like, just have them send it to you and then give it to us. But the hospital, my doctors, a lot of times in the US would not send it to me, even though it was my data.
That's crazy.
And so, yeah. So, I'm going to have some long-term effects because I didn't have surgery immediately. By the time the records came, it's 48 hours. I didn't have surgery for 72 hours. And I was just thinking, had I had it on my digital identity, I could have just given it to them right then and there, gone into surgery and been done. But because we have this paper system, it was just really hard. So that's one of the ones that I'm really excited about not just for me, because it's too late for me now, but because it can help so many people with healthcare and how they get treated and the diagnoses that are made. I just feel like it could be so very powerful if we had access to our own healthcare data. Try it sometime. Try getting your own medical record. Well, you have, because you
It's impossible. Yeah, it's impossible. And also, if, like the 9 to 5 hours, like they're not always open.
Yes.
So I'm sure that contributed to your 48 hours.
That's right. Because they don't work beyond the time. And then
which is fine. They're humans, but like you should have access to your paperwork whenever you want it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of, I was really surprised. Like that was kind of the nail in the coffin, if you would, that said, we have to do this. Like this is one of the reasons I went up to New York to speak to all these healthcare companies wanting to digitize all these healthcare records as well.
Yeah. That is ridiculous.
So that's my favorite. That's my very favorite one for sure.
Yeah. Do you have all those documents now? Can you store them in a place? Or no?
I have,
because they wouldn't even give you some of them.
They wouldn't give me some of them. No.
We got to get you a new doctor.
And it's really funny too, just looking at different medical systems. So the surgeon I had in Brazil, he still texts me. He's like, are you doing good? Are you still doing physical therapy once in a while? And in the US, I was talking to a doctor yesterday at dinner, and he said, I could never do that.
You can't text your patients. Yeah.
Could never do that. And so it's just a difference in countries too, right? So healthcare may take longer because every country has this different process for going through it.
Yeah, 100%. Sandy, I could talk to you for much, much longer, but unfortunately we got to wrap it up. Last thing, I'm sure you have a plethora of advice, but I always ask my guests to leave us with a piece of advice, something that you've carried with you throughout your career or life.
Well, the first thing I would say is in my career, I have always jumped on new technology. And I think if you don't have your Web3 identity, you should grab it. Grab it from us or grab it from someone else. But, the wheels are spinning faster and faster and faster, and don't get left behind. So I would go grab, your full name or Jackie, or, I would grab it to have it. In fact, I worked with a sheik in Middle East. He got his son's digital identity when his son was 6 days old, because he wanted to make sure that name was preserved and that he would have his Web3 identity. I think thinking bigger from a career perspective, I would say that asking questions, being curious, is what's going to help you grow throughout your life. I learned this at Amazon. Jeff Bezos asked tons of questions. One of my friends wrote a book on the common thread between all these great innovators like Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos or, Elon Musk. What was the common denominator? And the common denominator was they asked a lot of questions. They were curious. They didn't just accept things the way they were. They're like, well, why does it work that way? Well, how does it work? And that would be what I would say. A child asks questions, over 100 questions a day.
100%.
And I had 2 daughters. I know this is true. I think my daughter set the record. But adults typically only ask 10 questions a day. Doesn't include your podcast. But if you think about it, only question things about 10 times a day. So kids are 10x adults. And if we could get back in that mode, I think we would all be more successful and we would innovate more in our daily lives every day at work and at home.
I love that. And I agree. People should ask more questions. It's okay to not know everything. And it's great to be curious.
Yeah, for sure. Especially in the terms of AI and this new decade of AI and blockchain, ask the questions.
100%. Sandy, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.